specific webinar is targeted towards our partner community, so system integrators, ISVs, OEMs. My name is Ashwin Viswanath, and joining me today are Ron Lunasin and Nick Brisoux of the Cloud Platform Adoption Team. So we have an exciting agenda for you today. We're going to first of all just have a brief recap of the Informatica Cloud Platform and then dive straight into what's new with Informatica Cloud Spring 2014. And at a high level, really, it relates to the Cloud Designer. We've made a lot of changes to the Cloud Designer, and I think you'll be pretty excited to see some of the features in there. For those of you that OEM us and embed integration, you'll be excited to hear about some of our REST API changes. There's also changes to our Connector SDK and some real-time hybrid app integration. So with our Connector SDK, we've had a growing number of connectors, and most of these connectors are actually listed on the marketplace. So some of the premier connectors such as NetSuite, Salesforce, Amazon Redshift, Marketo, pretty much any Tier 1 SaaS app that you see there, we have a connector for. We also have several technology connectors to make our integration jobs easier, so protocols such as JSON, OData. So for some of the more really custom integration tasks that you may have, some of these technology protocols are quite useful for that purpose. Now, as far as the Informatica Cloud Platform goes, just to give you a brief overview of it, everything is powered by the virtual data machine, which is the Informatica Cloud Secure Agent. There's several management and administration capabilities available to you up the stack, and we have several data and process services ranging from Informatica Cloud Integration, Cloud MDM, to Cloud Process Automation. So for those of you that use us for just integration, just want to let you know that there are other products within the Informatica Cloud Platform as well. Products such as MDM and Process Automation. And combined with those applications are a number of design and development functionality that we have, from developing your own native connector using our Connector SDK, to using our REST API to embed integration, to building custom integration templates. And all this functionality can be published either as a marketplace or embedded within your app, or you can use Informatica Cloud. So this really just is a more of a drill down into what our platform is all about. So of course, this is Informatica Cloud, and it's all powered by Vibe. What you really get to see here is some of the more service integration and process integration capabilities within just the integration bucket itself. So most of you know that about a year ago, we acquired a company called Active Endpoints, and this past November, we came out with real-time app integration capabilities, and we'll have more to speak about that later on in the presentation. So just some quick metrics on the Informatica Marketplace, and this will especially be of interest to those of you that are startups or in the system integrator community. We've had 43% growth year on year in the number of apps that were published in the Informatica Marketplace. We've had 130% growth in the number of visitors, and we've had 210% growth in the number of downloads. As you can see, we have a significant amount of growth in the Informatica Marketplace for those of you that are wanting to use it to promote your connectors or your solution. Now, let's get into Informatica Cloud Spring 2014 and some of the new functionality that is coming out. Really, the highlight of the release is the Informatica Cloud Designer. And what this is we have 100% native Cloud Designer that has, we brought it into Informatica Cloud. And this gives you a lot of productivity for the advanced integration use. So for those of you that have been using Visio all this time for the templates, what you'll see is that using the Cloud Designer is very, very intuitive. Any functionality that you develop using the Cloud Designer is going to really result in it being applicable to all the native connectors. So just an overview of the designer itself is that you're going to have advanced drag and drop integration for your developers. So for those of you that are actually involved in making integrations to other systems, it's a really easy to use, intuitive way to go ahead and make these integrations. And your end users, for the app users, can really just have integration embedded within your app. And now to talk more about this, I'm actually going to pass the ball over to Ron Lunasin, and Ron will go over some of the more into greater depth about the features of the designer.
Thanks, Ashwin. So just wanted to again talk about the Cloud Designer and really kind of the core reasons on why we created it. You know, there really are two very specific reasons. As Ashwin had mentioned, one of the key things that we wanted to do is provide more capabilities natively within the Cloud UI to deal with more complicated use cases. Right? So that section in the previous slide where we talked about having something for developers, that really was one of the key reasons why we came up with this. You know, our nice, simple, easy to use capabilities with our wizards are great, but we knew that a lot of you out there in the partner community wanted and needed something that was a little bit more powerful without having to jump out of the cloud experience and going into something like our Visio plugin or even to our on-premise PowerCenter product. One of the other reasons why we came up with the Cloud Designer was actually to, the long-term view here is to replace the Visio components when you're dealing with a parameterized mapping. Now, some of you might not know exactly what I'm talking about there, and I'll definitely be going into those details when I jump into the demo. All right, so here is a quick screenshot on the screen right now of the Cloud Designer. I won't take too much time here talking about this slide. I'll just go into the details when I get into the demo. Now, one of the key features here with the Cloud Designer is that it does work with all of the cloud connectors that you have access to today. So whether it's something in the marketplace, whether it's a connector that you build yourself using the connector toolkit, or whether it's just a new connector that we provide, you'll have the ability to use those in the developer. And back to the second reason on why we created the developer was the ability to go off and create templatized mappings or templates all within the cloud experience. So again, for those of you that are doing this today with Informatica Cloud, you're using a plugin inside of Visio, and our goal here is to be able to provide a one-stop shop for building not only full fixed mappings, but also these parameterized mappings. Again, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this concept, I'll go into this in detail when I jump into the demos. And one of the very exciting things that we've come out with here in the Spring release is the ability to take these parameterized mappings and package them up and deploy them out to the end user community. So you can think of this as, if you're an ISV partner or an SI partner and you've got some pre-built mappings that you want to deploy to your customers, and maybe there's 2 or 3 mappings that are built specifically to deal with a certain business process, you would have the ability to build and design those inside of Informatica Cloud and then be able to package them up in a way that can be easily accessed by the end users. All right, so the concept here is a developer using the Cloud Designer builds these Vibe integration packages. These are these packages of these mappings that you want to group together. And then the end users can go off and either you provide access or go through the Informatica Cloud Marketplace and have the end users download and access them directly themselves. And then what they would have access to is a very simple wizard-based approach. They're not going to see the mappings that you created in the designer. Instead, they'll see a wizard that they're familiar with Informatica Cloud, so much easier to consume from an end-user standpoint. So that's one way of doing that. Another way that we can share these VIPs or Vibe integration packs are through people using PowerCenter today. So they'd be able to go off and leverage these same packages inside the PowerCenter environment. That's the Informatica on-premise environment. And lastly, have the ability, which some of you are using now, is the ability to pre-package and then actually embed or white label Informatica Cloud mappings into your applications. And those are all going to be available here with Cloud Designer. All right, so with that, and I'm going to go ahead and get into the product demos where I'm going to highlight both of those, just the overall breadth and capabilities of Informatica Cloud's Designer, and then talk about that parameterized mapping use case. All right, so I've got the InformaticaCloud.com website up, and I'm going to log in as you would normally do with Informatica Cloud. Right off the bat, for those of you that haven't had a look at Informatica Cloud since the upgrade, you'll see that the look and feel has been changed. So we've changed the color schemes and the layout a bit here to be more in line with the corporate marketing that we've got with Informatica. And we've done some work around the reconfiguration of some of the actual drop-downs here. I think this is going to be a lot more intuitive than the layout that we had in the past. All right, so for those of you that aren't as familiar with Informatica Cloud, just to let you know where we came from, here I'm going through something that we call the data synchronization wizard. And this is what people are, or what people were using to perform, some of the core data integration using Informatica Cloud. So going in, what you see here is our nice, simple, straightforward 6-step wizard where an end user can pick your source and your target, and they can define a data filter, and you can go in and define your mapping on how the data is going to move from source to target. So very straightforward. If it's a simple use case, this is still where we would expect people to start first, is within our simple wizards. But when we start to deal with more complicated use cases, or if you're more of a technical person or you're a developer and you want to have the ability to do things that are a bit more complex right off the bat, you can go to the design drop-down here and choose mappings. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new mapping so you can see exactly what this is going to look like. So I click on New Mapping. What you see is a nice empty palette, and on the left-hand side, you see the transformations that are exposed with our designer. For those of you familiar with Informatica PowerCenter, our on-premise tool, these are transformations we're probably very familiar with. This is really is kind of the core data integration capabilities now exposed here in the cloud. Now I'm going to perform a very simple mapping just to get through something that will actually run in a very short time frame. So I'll just pick a source, pick my target, and I'm just going to do a very simple expression as the data is moving from source to target. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just link everything together. And now I'm just going to go ahead and configure this. So my source, I'm going to just do a very simple mapping, moving data from a relational database, and I'll move it into Salesforce just to show how the connection details work. I go to source, and I'm going to choose my local SQL database, but any connection that you see in the standard wizards would be exposed here in the designer as well. So I choose that, and I'm going to choose my object, which will just be my standard account dim table. And now I'm going to perform a simple expression to the data that's being pulled out of my database. Click on the plus button to add a new expression, and I hit the configure area here. And what pops up is very similar to what you see in the data synchronization wizard. And here's where we start to expose the functionality of the expression transformation. So I'm going to perform a very simple transformation. Here you see again all the functions that are available to us. I'm going to perform a very simple concat, where I'm going to concat address 1 and address 2. And now if I hit validate, we see everything's great, and I hit OK, and now I've got my expression, and I can go in and rename this field here too, so it's a little bit more descriptive. So this is my address concat, and I'm going to change the data type to 255. All right, so now let's go ahead and map that data to my target. So I click on the target object, and I'm going to specify my target information. and I'm going to point this to my Salesforce connection, and I'm going to choose the account object. Now, this is a good example, and one of the reasons why I chose Salesforce here is just because there's a whole bunch of objects that are out there. If I wanted to, I can go off and actually type into this box here which objects I'm actually looking for, and it would filter on that implicitly. But I'm going to go ahead and just choose my account object. And if we go ahead and open up the advanced area, this is where, depending on the connection type that you choose, you will see the specific information for that connection. So here, Salesforce has a set of advanced parameters. Those are exposed here, whether it's NetSuite, whether it's Amazon Redshift, or whatever, maybe it's your own custom connectors. If you have custom properties, they would be exposed here under the advanced area. All right, so let's go ahead and save and run this. I forgot to do a step. So it warns me here, okay, we saved this, but it's actually not valid. If I wanted to see the details on why this was not valid, that's what this little checkbox is for here in the upper right-hand corner. So we go in here, and if I click validate here, it'll go through and tell me specifically where there are issues inside of my mapping. So here, oh yes, I forgot to map my fields in my target. So now, under target, I go to field mapping, and this is where you see how the data moves through the pipeline, my transformation pipeline, into my target. So I maximize that screen, and I can do our standard auto match, and of course I can drag and drop any other fields that I want. So account name goes to name, and I've got my concat fields going to billing street. All right, I go ahead now and do a save and run, and at this point, we're looking, this is going to be treated just like any other task inside of Informatica Cloud that you would see, where I'm going to choose my agent, let it run, and then it's going to go off and appear in the activity monitor screen, and then when it's done, we'll see it appear in the activity log screen. So after it's built, it's just like any other task that's out there. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at something that's a little bit more complex. So I go back to mappings. Let's take a look at this mapping that I've already created called order processing. And this will give you a feel for the kind of mappings that I'm sure many of you would like to be able to build right now. All right, so here, let's go ahead and get this so that it fits. I've got two different source objects. I've got an order table that's sitting inside of a SQL database. I've got the account object in Salesforce. I'm performing a heterogeneous join. So again, I'm joining together data from two different data sources. I'm performing a product lookup to get product information. Now, what this particular mapping does at a high level, it's grabbing order data, so I'm joining order and account, doing a lookup to get product information, and then based off of those three data sets, I'm determining what's going to be considered an expedited shipping order and what is a standard order. So here I've got a product filter too. I'm only want to do this processing for certain products, so I created a filter where I'm only going to be doing this processing for products that are the iPhone 5S. I've got an expression transformation that's going off and doing some core formatting, and then I've got two filters to determine what's the expedited shipments and what are standard. And both of these are just simply being written off to two different flat files, a flat file for expedited shipments and one for standard shipments. All right, so this gives you a good feel for something that's a little bit more complex, but I'm also going to use this mapping to transition over to the second reason why we created the Cloud Designer, which is to be able to come up with prepackaged, parameterized, or templatized mappings. Right, so the concept here is maybe you're a partner and you've built this for one of your customers. This is a core business process that you need for your application, or if you're an SI partner, you're doing this for your customers' business processes. And you want to be able to share this now with potentially multiple customers. Multiple customers have to deal with the same sorts of processes that you're used to dealing with. So what I'm going to do, or what I've actually done, is I've copied that working mapping and I've parameterized it. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that here. And the concept is, I've got something, I know it's something that can be shared with multiple customers, but every customer is going to have to configure things a little bit differently. You can't just go off and just reuse the same exact mapping. So what I've got here up on the screen is I have the ability now to go off and let's say parameterize the different source connections that I've got. So I can go and parameterize, every customer is going to have a different location potentially on where their data is stored. Everybody's going to have a different connection for Salesforce. So here, under my order object, I've gone in and actually changed this so it's not fixed to a particular database connection. I've chosen a parameter. So every customer can choose their location on where order is stored. Same thing goes for account. Every customer is going to have a different connection, their login information for their Salesforce account. Potentially also just the high-level process makes sense to be shared, but some people might not be selling the same products, or most people won't be selling the same products. So here I've put in a filter or a parameter inside of my filter condition. So the filter itself has been parameterized. And lastly, I think even more interesting here is what we're doing on the target side. So potentially your customers are going to maybe want to write to completely different kinds of targets. So again, I've parameterized the target locations. And even more importantly, one of the key things I've done here, let's say here for my expedited shipments, I've actually gone off and parameterized the mapping screen. Now this, I think, is going to be something that many of you will find a lot of value in. You've come up with a pre-built mapping for a very common business process that you want to share, and there's certain out-of-the-box fields that you want mapped over. Now what I've done here is I've chosen something that's called a partially parameterized field mapping. And the concept is you can deliver out-of-the-box mappings that cannot be changed by the end user, but you still want to provide flexibility, let's say, around custom fields. Every customer may have different additional fields that they want to move over as part of this process, so just expose those fields to them. And that's what I've done here. All right, so as a developer, you've gone off, you've created this parameterized mapping. So now what? What does the end user actually see? And now, to see that part, I'm going to switch over to the apps area, and I'm going to go to mapping configuration. All right, so now let's view this demo as we're switching roles. Now it's an end user. It's one of your customers that wants to get access to that parameterized mapping, or that VIP, the Vibe integration pack that you've created and published to the end users. All right, so now an end user will go in, and they hit new, and they want to deal with their orders. I want to do my orders. I'm going to run that on my agent. And here under mapping is where I'm going to select, and here is where I will see all of the VIPs that I have downloaded as a customer. And here I've already downloaded that order processing VIP that I showed you earlier, so I'm going to go off and select that. Now what this particular wizard is doing is it's actually going in and understanding the parameterization points within that VIP. And that's the parameters are the only things that are going to be exposed to the end user for configuration. So the key here is the end user does not have to go in and fully understand potentially a very complex mapping. Instead, what they're going to see is a simple set of wizards to prompt them to specify their configuration choices for the parameterized pieces that have been exposed. So I hit next, and we go to step 2, which is it's going off and finding the source information that has been parameterized. And here we see that we can specify, my connections. So I'm going to go off and I'll choose the account information for me. So this is my Salesforce connection details and my database information for the order. The same thing goes here for targets. In the original mapping that I showed you, it was flat file where the targets for both, but I've exposed this in a way through the parameters that I can choose a different target location altogether. It doesn't have to be the same type. So I'm going to write, instead of to a flat file for expedited shipping, I'm going to choose a database instead. But I still want to write the standard to a file. Now the key here is step 4, the other parameters. Right? So I parameterize the filter condition, and I parameterize the field mapping to the target. And that's what you see here. And because, again, I chose that partial parameterized mapping on that expedited shipping target, I don't see the standard out-of-the-box fields there. The customer can't change those. That's what you wanted to pre-package. What they do get exposed to are any custom fields that are there. So in addition to the standard fields, I've updated my shipment object for this particular connection to have a few custom fields. And now I can map whatever fields are coming in from my sources to those custom fields, and those would automatically be moved over. And then, of course, down below here, too, I can just choose whatever product that I want to filter on for my particular business. And so the key here with the concept of VIPs is that you can go off as a publisher, as a partner, and have some very complicated mappings. This is not that complicated. You can create something that's a lot more complicated than this. But you can have some complicated stuff that's out there, but the end users would only be exposed to the parameterization points, which makes it much easier for them to consume. So again, they can consume this here inside of Informatica Cloud directly if they were to download the VIPs from the marketplace, or if we gave them access to that. They can consume this through the Informatica on-premise PowerCenter product, and of course, they'll also be able to consume this if you were to choose the white-labeled approach and have the API layer be the configuration point and not this wizard. Okay, so the real-time hybrid application integration components were introduced in the winter release. What we've done here in the spring release is we've taken some of the real-time capabilities that we have and not only have things out there purely in the cloud to deal with cloud-to-cloud application integration use cases, we've added components of the real-time architecture to be part of the Informatica Cloud Secure Agent. Now that's going to make things a lot easier to deal with not only cloud-to-cloud, but cloud-to-on-premise application real-time use cases. So again, if this is something of interest to you, definitely reach out to us. Otherwise, expect to see additional webinar series around these capabilities going forward. But I at least wanted to highlight it here, so in case this is of interest, you can reach out to us directly. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand over to Nick to talk about some of the hardcore technical stuff around the changes we've done here around the REST API and our connector SDK. So Nick?
Thanks, Ron. So we've put in a number of changes for the REST API, and most of those have been requests from our OEM developer community. So I think you'll be excited by some of the changes we've brought in. So we've got a bunch of new functionality. We've done some enhancements to the job register and user functions, and then I'm going to cover our new session management capabilities. So the first new function that we've added is the audit log call, which allows you to request entries from the audit log. So you can either return the last 200 entries, or you can specify with a specific batch ID and the number of entries you want to get back. This next one, the task, I think a lot of people have been asking for this, especially if you're trying to build your own administration or monitoring console. So you can now get the lists of tasks back with their names and their ideas from the active list. And of course, you can specify what kind of task you want to see. So if it's a DSS synchronization task or a replication service task, etc. Previously, what was available was the MT task for interacting with the custom integration tasks. So I'm sure there's quite a few people out here that are pretty happy that we've added that functionality finally. Lastly, under new functionality, we've added a user group function call to get the details of a user group or of a specific user group or all the user groups in an organization. So another big change is you can now do a full registration using the REST API. So we've added the ability to post the security question and answer, which is one of the requirements we have when you're creating a user. So that's now available both for the regular register function call and the register Salesforce SF here REST API call, and it allows you to do a full login with the API now. We've added additional information to the user function call as well, so you can get additional details for users. Now, here's one of the important changes that we've made. Now, previously, we didn't have very fine-tuned control over sessions. So basically, you created a session and then it eventually expired. So we finally added an explicit logout call, which means you can determine when your session ends. More importantly, you can now have multiple concurrent REST API sessions. And you'll have to explicitly terminate those, and that will invalidate the IC session ID. But if in order to support the existing functionality so that so everything was backwards compatible, what we did was we made any session that isn't explicitly terminated with a logout call expire after 2 hours, which was really the old functionality. So the big one is now, of course, that you can have the multiple concurrent sessions. And the number of sessions that you can have will be determined by whatever your license type is for your organization. So the other exciting thing that we're going to be releasing is we're going to be releasing a sample code project for our midstream capability. And just to give a brief recap of that, so we released that in our previous release, and so that would be the winter release. And basically, just to walk you through quickly the diagram here, you can think of it as an in-process lookup or write or read that you need to do before you write to your final target. So an example would be, let's say you're reading some orders from Salesforce, you then go create those orders in NetSuite, and then there's some return information that you want to go update that orders object in Salesforce. So we've had that capability since the previous winter release. So we're going to be releasing a sample code project with some sample code showing you how to implement that. And I'm going to be posting that on our Informatica Cloud GitHub site, and you'll see it there. We've shared that link previously, but you'll see it under the list of projects. So it'll be along with we have our regular Salesforce.com adapter sample, we have our JDBC sample adapter, and now we're going to have the sample connector code for midstream capability. All right, so this next one is kind of a cool feature that we snuck in there for this release, and that's the ability to create targets using a synchronization task. So now, if you choose to, when your user, and I'll give a brief demo of this shortly, but when your user comes to selecting the target screen, they can choose, much like you can for flat files, if you're familiar with working with flat files, you can choose to create a target there. So if you want to give the ability to your users to do that, you now have that available to you. And it's pretty straightforward to enable. Again, this is for those of you who have worked with the connector toolkit. In the iPlugin interface, you're going to have to add this flag, which is supports create record, to the get capabilities call, and there's a little example here. And then there's a new interface called iDefine metadata, which you'll have to implement, which of course will return the list of records that you're creating. And the workflow is pretty basic, and again, you'll see it in the demo. What we do is we look at the source structure and we say, okay, we don't have a target structure. We're just going to copy all those fields. Again, same workflow as we use for the flat file, and then copy that over to to the target. Okay, so Ashwin, if you can hand over control, and I'll give a real quick demo of that. So here we are, and we'll take a look at this task that I've already created. So in this case, our Redshift connector has had this capability built into it. So my source here is SQL Server. We're going to grab a table with some account information, and then we're going to move that into Redshift. And in Redshift, you can see here I don't have a target. So much like a flat file, here I can click on this Create Target button and then choose to give the target a name, and then there's some capability here to customize what the target table is going to look like. So I'm going to remove out the ID and the customer priority. We'll click OK. And now, of course, in the data preview, there's nothing because the structure doesn't exist yet. I already had a filter set up here. Now, it's going to auto-map everything, of course, because the names are going to match in the target structure. And then I just need to do a few things here related to the actual Redshift connection itself, and then we'll take a look at this. So we'll save and run this, and in about 30 seconds, we should get a target structure in our Redshift cluster. So again, just a reminder, this currently is only available in the synchronization tasks, but we will be rolling it out for the designer as well, again, with some additional capabilities in the UI to sort of customize the data types as they move across. So right now, the way that it works is we replicate essentially what the source structure in the destination target with the ability to remove some of the fields.
Yeah, this is a really important functionality that many of you that we've worked with directly have already asked for. There's often times where you have simply a staging use case that you want to be able to deal with, where you want to have the ability for your customers to just give you their data, and you don't necessarily have an object that they should be loading into. You just want them to stage it over to your site or to your application. So this is really around that use case, just getting it over, dump the data over as fast and easy as possible. For those of you that have tried to deal with this in the past, we've had to jump through a lot of hoops, kind of fake a target, do all sorts of weird things like that. I'm personally very excited to have this functionality available now.
Yeah, this is very cool. So let's go take a look at the target structure now. So this is I'm using a SQL visualization tool here, and you can see it's created my account table. And if we go look at the columns, you'll see that it only created those columns that I had specified. So it didn't put in the ID or the I believe it was the account creation ID or I forget which one. But okay, Ashwin, I'm going to give this back to you to present the slides again. Let me click on the stop sharing. So here's an example of, for example, Salesforce, how they do it. So Salesforce, it's a web services-based API, but their API supports their object model, which has this notion of, foreign keys and primary keys, essentially. So if you've got this type of structure and you'd like to implement support for that within the toolkit, we can certainly help you with that. We don't currently have any sample code. But if you're thinking you need this kind of functionality, then we'll schedule a more deep dive discussion with you to make sure that we can give you the right advice and that this is the right solution for you. And just to make it clear, this is not a solution for more complex hierarchical type of structures. So you can think of those like something with a very deep hierarchy within an XML structure. This is for more like relational type relationships with primary keys and foreign keys. And with that, Ashwin, that's all I had to share with today.
Great. Thank you, Nick and Ron. And so we have reached the Q&A portion of our webinar, and there's quite a lot of questions here on the chat panel. And one question that's been asked repeatedly by a lot of our attendees is, what exactly is a VIP, or a Vibe Integration Package?
Yeah, so the Vibe Integration Package is the ability to actually group together multiple objects inside of Informatica Cloud. I think the most useful thing that's going to be out there are those parameterized mappings that I showed you, because it gives a certain level of configuration and control to the end users where they can deal with prepackaged content but still make it relevant for what their use cases and customizations are. So it would be packaging those together, but you can also package together just regular mappings. You don't have to have those be parameterized. You can package together data synchronization tasks. Really, almost anything that you have that's content can be made available and grouped together as a single package. So that's really kind of the key. It's an overall container for multiple components of Informatica Cloud that have the ability to be downloaded from the marketplace or shared with end users through some of our capabilities from an administration standpoint.
Great. The next question here is, for folks that already have some of their mappings developed using the old Visio tool, can they transfer that into the Cloud Integration Designer? How compatible are they?
So we will continue to support the Visio capabilities or the Visio add-on to build out templatized or templates or parameterized mappings. So we're going to continue to support that going forward. And part of the reason for that is, as you jump into the Cloud Integration Designer, it currently does not have all of the functionality available with what's there inside of Visio. So we will probably eventually sunset and deprecate the Visio piece, but not until we have full feature parity on that side. So in the meantime, again, we encourage you to use the Cloud Integration Designer where appropriate, but if you needed some of that additional functionality that's not there, then you can still go off and use Visio as you are today.
Okay, great. So the next question here is, what transforms are currently supported in the Cloud Designer, and what are some of the future transforms that we can foresee?
Yeah, so this is in some ways related to the previous question. What we have here is the start of the Cloud Integration Designer. We made a lot of great progress with this starting point, but we will continue to enhance going forward the capabilities that are shown here. So what we've exposed today from a transformation standpoint are essentially all of the same transformations that are available already or even before this in the prior releases with the data synchronization wizard, but now you have the ability to choose the order and add as many of these things as you want. So these are the core features or transformations that we have out. We are going to be enhancing with every release going forward, or at least every release at least for this year, more and more expressions and transformations. So if there's a certain set of transformations that you're particularly interested in and want exposed in Informatica Cloud, definitely reach out and let us know. We've got a priority list right now, but that is definitely going to be something that can be changed based off of your feedback. So if there's anything in there that you want, let us know, and we'll try to put those sooner on the list to get in there in the product.
The next question here is around the REST API. So if you already have an existing embedded integration app using the REST API, with these new changes that have been made, including the session control changes, what changes would have to be made on the back end to make sure it's still functional?
So the way this was rolled out was to make sure that no existing white label apps were broken. So essentially, in the specific case of the session timeout, we've made it so that the functionality is similar to what it was before, where if you're not calling, and you won't be because the call wasn't available, for those not calling logout explicitly, there will be a 2-hour timeout after the fact. So you don't have to do anything, but it is becoming part of the new best practices to integrate the logout REST API call into your white label app.
Great. And there's a couple of questions here about the connector SDK. One question here is, with the changes in the connector SDK, is there some kind of, once again, new version of an existing connector that needs to be done? So if a partner already has developed a connector using the previous version of the connector SDK, with these new changes, do they have to do anything to republish it?
That's a great question. So if you're not adding any new functionality, which is I'm assuming is the context of this question, then you don't need to do anything. In fact, unless there's a specific functionality that you need to add, if you're, for example, the midstream capability, we introduced a new iWrite interface called iWrite 2. Well, if you don't need that functionality, you can keep on using the old interface, which is the iWrite interface. Now, there are some benefits to moving to the new interface, but it is not required. And certainly, we'll be releasing additional documentation and samples, both to explain what the benefits are of switching to the new interface, and better understanding how to work with the new multi-object capability. But again, you don't need to change anything today. This isn't this isn't a Java version change or anything along those lines. You can just keep your connector package as you're building it today.
Great. And I think those are all the questions that we have for today. So, folks, thanks again for joining us, and we will make the recording as well as a copy of the slides available and email it to all attendees. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.